When 1 Peter 2:2 says, as newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word that you may grow thereby. One thing that the word desire invokes in our mind is that spiritual growth is not automatic, it's not spontaneous, and it's not a mistake. It does not happen by mistake. As newborn babes, desire, it means that you must be deliberate about it, you must be intentional about it if you want to experience it in your life. So to talk about growth and what growth is, how growth happens, I'm going to step into this conversation to explain what spiritual growth is not. What exactly spiritual growth is not. And some of the materials in this conversation, I learned them from Pastor Warren, where he talked about what spiritual growth is not. Because many believers think that they are growing when they are actually not growing. Sometimes activities like going to church, watching one or two online reels, and stuff like that, they give us this feeling that we actually have some knowledge or that we are growing when we really are not. You see, listening to some social media influencers who may even be a medical doctor does not automatically make you a doctor. If you want to be a doctor, you have to deliberately go through a process in medical school. Same thing with spiritual growth. So binge watching some material here, binge watching some material there, having a lot of reels on your phone, those are not the things that cause growth. Growth is deliberate, is intentional, and it is systematic. So what spiritual growth is not, I'm not going to talk to you about a couple of things that people do or people experience that they assume it is growth. And by adventure, you are in that category, you can know that, oh, all right, I'm not actually growing yet. One of them is, first of all, spiritual growth is not automatic. I mentioned that earlier. Just because you are born again does not mean you will grow. A baby does not grow because it is alive. It must be fed, it must be cared for, and it must learn, it must grow. In the same manner, salvation gives us life, but growth requires responsibility. We don't grow by chance, we grow by choice. So the first thing you should know is that don't think because you gave your life to Jesus some years ago, you gave your life to Jesus 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, don't think that because of that you are automatically growing. Spiritual growth is not automatic, right? And then we don't grow by chance, we grow by choice. Secondly, spiritual growth is not in an instant. It does not happen instantly. It takes time. It's a process. Our generation is privileged to have a lot of things comfortably. We have fast food, fast internet, fast results. But spiritual growth does not work that way. Growth is a process. It is not an instant thing. So you must be ready for the long haul. You must be ready to commit yourself to a long process where days will come, nights will pass, but you are consistently doing the same thing. And that's how you experience spiritual growth, right? You must be ready to commit yourself to a long process. Days when you get it right, days when you get it wrong, days will come when you did it perfectly, days will come when you didn't get it perfectly. You must learn not to be discouraged by the progress, even though it is slow. You must be committed to consistent growth. There's no shortcut to growth, right? So growth is not an instant thing. It takes time. So firstly, growth is not automatic. Secondly, growth is not an instant thing. Thirdly, spiritual growth is not measured by how much you know. This is very, very important. This is very, very important. Spiritual growth is not measured by how much you know. You see, knowing a lot of the Bible, knowing a lot about Jesus, knowing a lot about the Bible, knowing a lot about the Christian history does not translate to spiritual growth. You can know the scriptures and still not be growing. Knowledge is not the same thing as transformation. Knowledge, I repeat, is not the same thing as transformation. You see, there are people who quote verses, but their life does not reflect Christ. So the question is not how much you know, but what has changed in your life. Don't just ask the question, what do I know? But what has changed in my life because of what I know. True growth is in the transformation, not in the information. I'll say that again. True growth is in the transformation, not in the information. So thirdly, spiritual growth is not measured by how much you know. Number 4, spiritual growth is not a private matter. Some people say things like my relationship with God is personal, which is true. Yes, it is personal, but it is not private. Your spiritual growth, your relationship with God may be personal, but it is not private. You see, real growth will show. Real growth will really show. It will show in your character, in the way you relate with others. It will show in your action. People will know that, oh, this person has been doing something that is making him or her better. Everything about growth is that it shows in how you interact with others. It shows in how you relate with others. It shows in your character. So growth is visible. If nobody can see changes, then your growth is questioning. You can't say you are growing, and people cannot see any definite difference in your life. More so, you must understand that Christians need relationship to grow. You don't grow in isolation. We don't grow in isolation. That is why we need the church, right? We develop in the context of fellowship. God intends for us to grow in the family. That's what Hebrews 10 verse 24 to 25 says, that we should learn to consider how we can inspire one another towards love and good work. That we should not give up on meeting with each other as some are in the habit of doing. Let us encourage one another. So growth, as much as your relationship with God is personal, growth is not a private thing. Growth is not a private thing. Not only is it that it shows in how you relate and react to others, people can see it, it is palpable to people, but also the fact that you need relationships to grow. You need a system of relationship, preferably in a local church where you can experience growth. The quality of your relationship with Christ can be seen and will be seen in the quality of your relationship with other believers. I'll say that again so that you won't miss it. The quality of your relationship with Jesus Christ will be seen in the quality of your relationship with other believers. You see, Acts 6 is a very good example. There was this time when there was a challenge with how food and needs will be distributed in the church, right? And there was a lot of conversation about what to do about it. You see, the apostles simply said that what they need is matured men who can handle the matter. And it wasn't a difficult decision for the church to make. The church didn't look at the congregation and the new people who are matured enough to take up the responsibility, right? That is because spiritual growth is visible to everybody. It is palpable to everybody. So it's not a private thing like people usually say. It is not a private thing. We need godly relationships to help us grow, especially in the context of the local church, and then much more. Our growth, spiritual growth, reflects in our relationship with others. The next thing, the fifth point, spiritual growth is not achieved by Bible study alone. I've said that earlier already. The context of spiritual growth is not a function of how much you know, but it is very, very crucial because it's a mistake we make many times. We think that we can sit in our house, sit in our rooms, and read the Bible a lot. We just experience growth. Spiritual growth is not achieved by Bible study alone. Studying the Bible is powerful, but study alone is not enough. Right? You need a lot of other spiritual activities and experience to experience growth beyond Bible study. Genuine spiritual maturity includes that you have this heart of worship and praise toward God. It involves building and enjoying lovely relationship with others. It involves using your gifts and talents in the service of others and sharing your faith with other people. So if you want to grow spiritually, it won't happen by just accumulating knowledge alone, by just reading the Bible alone. You must apply what you learn. Don't just read the word of God, living it, an heart of worship, sharing your faith with others, and all of that. They are essential things to grow beyond Bible study alone. Sixth point, spiritual growth is not achieved by prayer alone. Don't get me wrong. Prayer is very, very essential if you will grow. But prayer alone does not produce growth, because growth requires a lot of that obedience, discipline, application of God's word. You can pray and still not change. Growth happens when prayer meets practice. The seventh point is that spiritual growth is not equal to spiritual growth. This is a very common mistake we make, especially in the Pentecostal charismatic circle. That you can preach, you can prophesy, you can sing, you are gifted, you can operate in the gifts of the Spirit, does not mean you are growing. You can have all of that and still lack in character. Gifts are given, growth is developed. Gifts are given, growth must be developed. Don't confuse activity with maturity. Don't confuse giftings with growth. A person can be gifted and still not be growing, right? So growth is not equivalent to spiritual gifts. And finally, spiritual growth is not a title or position. It's not in a title or in a position. Another very big mistake people make is that once they hear words like pastor or a leader or a worker or a minister in church, we automatically assume that this person is spiritually matured. While this should be the case, sadly, that is not always the case. Ideally, for a person to be a pastor, it is assumed that the person has grown spiritually. So for a person to be a leader, it is assumed that the person has achieved some level of spiritual growth. But that's not what we have today. There are people who are leaders, who are pastors, and they know they are not growing. And Maybe you are here, you're even listening to that, and you know in your heart that, oh, even though I have this position, I wasn't prepared for it yet, I wasn't appropriate for it yet. Maybe it was this reason or that reason, that was why I had it. It does not translate to the fact that you have grown spiritually. So don't measure your growth by your position, measure it by how your character has improved, made by your character and consistency. So, what are these 8 things I said spiritual growth is not? Spiritual growth is not automatic, spiritual growth is not instant, spiritual growth is not measured by how much you know, spiritual growth is not measured by spiritual gifts, it's not measured by leadership title or positions, it is not a private matter, it is not achieved by Bible study alone, and it's not achieved by prayer alone. Spiritual growth is intentional, it is progressive, it is practical, and it is visible. So the question is not, are you saved? The question is, are you really growing spiritually? Auxano, it is time to grow spiritually. In the next conversation, I'll tell you what exactly is the beginning of spiritual growth. Where exactly does spiritual growth start from? Remember, God has a plan for your life, and the devil also has a plan for your life. And I'm hoping that these conversations will help you walk in God's plan for your life and avoid the devil's plan for your life. I'll see you in the next conversation.